My stepkid said she only answers to her mother. So I stopped paying the bills in my name, closed my car insurance, and moved out. She didn't expect that quiet change. My name's Andrew. I'm 44 years old. After the divorce, I swore I'd never build another life from scratch. You tell yourself you learn from pain, that the next time you'll see the cracks before they spread, that you'll know when to walk away. But then someone like Melissa appears. Calm voice, steady hands, a kind of gentleness that makes you forget all the reasons you promised yourself not to start again. She was grounded, or at least she seemed that way. She had a daughter, Harper, 16. Thin, quiet, sharp around the edges like a blade hidden in a smile. When I met them, I saw a second chance. Not just at love, but at belonging. I thought maybe this was what peace looked like. A woman who didn't yell. A girl who might one day trust me. A house with no ghosts from the past. We found a place outside Austin. An old rental, cracked driveway, grass that hadn't been cut in months. The kind of house that looked tired but not beyond saving. Melissa called it charming. I called it workable. We signed the lease, packed 2 cars, and started over. New furniture, new tools, new rhythm. The first nights were quiet, almost sweet. Melissa hummed while unpacking boxes. Harper sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, the blue light flickering against her face. I told myself she was shy, just adjusting. I kept fixing things. Tightening door hinges, patching drywall, sanding the back deck. I believed that effort could create affection, that consistency could breed trust. When I came home from work, I'd find Harper in the living room, feet on the table, headphones in. I'd nod, say hello. Most times she didn't answer. Melissa would whisper, "She just needs time." So I waited. I fixed the leaky faucet in the kitchen, repainted the hallway, built raised garden beds behind the house and planted lavender because Melissa liked the smell. Every nail, every brushstroke, every hour spent on that place was a small offering. Not to the house, but to the idea of family. First, I thought it was working. Melissa started to laugh again, that kind of soft laugh that comes from comfort. She'd stand in the doorway and say, "You make this place feel like home." I'd smile, hold her, believe her. But Harper watched us with that flat expression teenagers use when they've already made up their mind about you. She was polite at first, barely. But even politeness felt rehearsed. Something she performed so her mother wouldn't scold her. She'd mumble thanks when I cooked dinner, or yeah, when I asked about school, and then retreat into her room where music leaked through the walls. I tried to reach her the way I knew how, by helping. I offered to teach her how to drive, to change a tire, to cook something besides microwave noodles. She declined every time. Sometimes she didn't even bother to look up from her phone when she said no. One Saturday, I asked if she could help me clean out the garage. She said she had homework. 2 hours later, I found her lying on the couch watching a show with earbuds in. I didn't say anything. I just went back to sweeping. That's what I did best, swallow things. Let them settle inside. Melissa said I was overthinking. "It's just teenage stuff," she told me. "She'll grow out of it." But Harper didn't grow out of it. She grew sharper, colder. Her silences became longer. The house started to feel like a hotel. Me paying for everything, them just passing through. It's strange how you can live with people and still feel like a stranger in your own home. I'd come back from work and see dirty dishes piled in the sink, laundry left half done, lights burning in every room. I'd ask Harper to help out, just small things. Take the trash out, feed the dog, wipe the counters. She'd sigh, roll her eyes, or pretend not to hear. Once, I stood at her bedroom door while she scrolled on her phone. I said, "Can you please unload the dishwasher before dinner?" She didn't look up, just said, "Ask Mom." Something in the way she said it, casual, dismissive, made me freeze. It wasn't rebellion. It was dismissal. When I told Melissa later, she laughed softly, as if to defuse it. "She didn't mean it like that. You're too sensitive." Sensitive. I hadn't been called that in years. The more I tried to reach Harper, the more invisible I became. If I spoke, she tuned me out. If I asked something, she waited for her mother to repeat it before moving. Even the dog listened to me more than she did. It got to the point where I'd stop mid-sentence, realizing there was no point finishing. I started working longer hours. Coming home late meant fewer awkward dinners, fewer moments where I'd sit across from her and feel like an intruder. Melissa said she missed me. Harper didn't notice. But every night, when the house went quiet, I'd find myself standing in the hallway, staring at the closed door of Harper's room, the faint sound of her music leaking through, wondering how something that started with hope had turned into this cold, wordless stalemate. I tried to talk to Melissa again, told her I felt like an outsider in my own house. She said I was imagining things. She's just going through a phase. But phases pass. This didn't. A few weeks later, Harper came home from school and left her muddy shoes on the new rug. I asked her to clean up. She didn't move. I repeated myself. She turned, looked me dead in the eye and said, "I said I'll do it later." Hours passed. The mud dried. She never touched it. I cleaned it myself. After that, something changed in me. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was fatigue. The kind that seeps into your bones when you realize effort doesn't mean anything to people who never asked for it. Still, I kept going. I kept paying the bills, fixing what broke, driving her to school when Melissa was late. I told myself love was built through repetition, that if I kept showing up, eventually she'd see me. But she didn't. Instead, she learned that she could ignore me without consequence, that her mother would step in before I ever raised my voice, that my patience wasn't strength, it was surrender. One night, I was in the kitchen washing dishes. Melissa was upstairs taking a shower. Harper came in, poured herself a glass of juice, left the empty carton on the counter. I said, "Harper, can you throw that out, please?" She didn't move. I turned off the water. "Harper." She looked at me then, expression blank, voice flat. I only listened to my mom. The words were so simple they didn't even sound cruel. Just factual. Like weather. She walked out, and the sound of her door closing upstairs felt like a verdict. I stood there for a long time, the kitchen light buzzing faintly, the smell of soap still on my hands. I thought about every nail I'd driven into the walls, every repair I'd made, every quiet morning I'd spent trying to belong. All of it erased by 7 words. I realized, standing there with wet hands and an empty room, that this wasn't rebellion. It wasn't even teenage defiance. It was clarity. Harper wasn't waiting for me to earn her respect. She had decided from the beginning that I didn't belong. Melissa would never admit it, but she had decided too, in silence. And that's when I understood. Some houses can't be fixed. Some families don't want saving. Some people don't want a new beginning. They just want someone to pay for it. That night, the house felt smaller, quieter, as if it knew what I finally did, that I was the only one still pretending this was a home. It didn't happen overnight. Most things don't. The house didn't explode with argument. It just decayed. Small, daily humiliations, like rust crawling over metal until it's too late to clean. You learn to live with it. The disrespect, the silence, the way your name sounds foreign in your own kitchen. You pretend not to hear the slammed doors, the laughter behind them, the whispered jokes that stop when you walk in. You tell yourself it's temporary, that good men endure, that patience is love. But patience has an expiration date. By the time spring came, Harper's indifference had sharpened into open contempt. She stopped greeting me altogether. If I said good morning, she'd walk right past me. If I tried to speak, she'd reach for her headphones. Even the sound of my footsteps seemed to irritate her. The dog, once loyal to me, began sleeping in her room, bribed, probably, with snacks and affection I was no longer allowed to give. Melissa said nothing. She'd watch us from the corner of her eye, sense the tension thickening between us, and change the subject. She was careful, diplomatic, afraid to upset the fragile balance of mother and daughter. Her silence was the loudest thing in the house. I remember the night it all cracked. The night I stopped pretending we were a family. It was late after 11. Harper was still awake, music blasting, laughter echoing from upstairs. I went to her room and knocked gently. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. "Harper, it's late. Turn it down." The door opened halfway. She stood there in a hoodie, eyes sharp, mouth curled in something between mockery and boredom. What? I asked you to lower it. Why? Because people are trying to sleep. She tilted her head, smiled faintly. Not kindly, not even cruelly, just amused. Then close your door. The sentence hit me harder than I expected. Not because of what she said, but because of how she said it, as if I didn't exist outside the boundaries of my room. As if my presence in this house was conditional, temporary, insignificant. I looked at her and said, quietly, "You know, I've done everything I can to make this work." She shrugged. Then stopped trying. The door closed. I stood there in the hallway, my hands still resting on the wood, listening to her laughter rise again behind it. I waited for Melissa to say something, to call out, to intervene, to remind her daughter what respect looked like. But nothing came. Only silence, and the faint hum of music through the wall. That was when something in me stopped bending. The next morning I woke early. The house was still. Melissa and Harper were asleep. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, a blank sheet of paper in front of me. I didn't know what I meant to write. Maybe a letter, maybe a list. What came out instead was a reckoning. Rent, utilities, internet, streaming services, insurance, car maintenance, groceries, gas. Every line item that kept this house alive. Every invisible thread I'd been holding together while they acted like it ran on magic. All of it mine. Every bill under my name. Every dollar pulled from my account. I stared at the list for a long time, the ink drying slow and black. I realized how invisible that labor had become, how they had taken it for granted, turned necessity into background noise. By the time Melissa came downstairs, I had made my decision. She smiled sleepily, kissed my cheek, asked if I wanted breakfast. I said no. My voice must have sounded different because she paused. "Everything okay?" I looked at her and said the first honest thing in months. "No, it isn't." She frowned. "Did something happen?" "Something's been happening for a long time," I said. "You just haven't wanted to see it." Her expression tightened. That polite tension of a woman bracing for an argument she won't admit is coming. "If this is about Harper again, it's about all of it." I slid the paper across the table. "That's what keeps this place running. Every dollar, every bill, every obligation. All of it's under me." She glanced at it, half confused, half defensive. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm done paying for people who don't think I exist." Her eyes narrowed. "Andrew." But I was already standing. "You want me quiet? Fine. You want me patient? Done. But patience has a price. Respect does too." I left the paper there and went to work. That day, between phone calls and deadlines, I started making real ones, the kind that sever. I called the insurance company first. Canceled my policy on the car Melissa drove. Then the bank. Stopped every auto payment, every subscription, every convenience they had mistaken for permanence. One by one, the strings were cut. By the time I returned home, the house looked the same, calm, ordinary, unsuspecting. Harper was on the couch watching something on her laptop, headphones in, oblivious. Melissa was cooking. She asked how my day was. I said fine. She didn't notice the tone. That evening, I paid one final month of rent, just one, and texted Melissa. My hands didn't shake. "The house is yours till the end of the month. I'm moving out." She came into the living room holding her phone, eyes wide. "What is this?" "It's what it looks like. You can't just leave." "I already have," I said. "This is just the paperwork catching up." Harper looked up briefly, then back down at her screen. No reaction, no surprise, just indifference, the final confirmation that I had made the right choice. Melissa followed me into the bedroom, voice trembling now. "You're overreacting. She's a kid. She doesn't mean half of what she says." "That's the problem," I said. "She never means it, and you never make her." "Please," she whispered. "Don't do this. You're part of this family." "No," I said, folding the last shirt into my bag. "I was the foundation. You all just lived on it." She didn't stop me after that. She just stood there, silent, while I zipped my suitcase. Later that night, I sat alone in the driveway with the car idling, hands on the wheel, eyes on the dark windows of the house I had built with my labor, my money, my patience. There was no light behind them, just shadows moving slowly through rooms that would never hold me again. I thought about knocking on Harper's door one last time, saying goodbye, explaining that I wasn't angry, just done. But what would have been the point? She wouldn't have heard me. She only listened to her mother. So I drove away. No shouting. No explanations. Just facts. It felt less like leaving and more like finally stepping out of a lie. As I merged onto the highway, I caught my reflection in the window. A man older than he remembered being, but calmer than he had been in years. I thought of all the nights I'd sat at that kitchen table trying to be enough for people who had already decided I wasn't. All the compromises, the swallowed words, the polite smiles. The road stretched ahead, dark and endless, and for the first time in a long time, it felt honest. Sometimes silence isn't surrender. It's declaration. They had told me in their own ways that my voice meant nothing. So I gave them what they wanted. Silence. The morning after I left, the silence felt different. Not the uneasy quiet that used to sit in the corners of that house, but a clean one, deliberate, finished. I woke before sunrise in a rented room above my workshop on the edge of town. The air smelled of sawdust and motor oil. I made coffee in a chipped mug and stood by the window watching the horizon shift from gray to gold. No voices, no slammed doors, no laughter that wasn't mine. Just the hum of a world that no longer expected anything from me. My phone buzzed around 8. Melissa. I let it ring until it stopped. A minute later came the text. Harper's shocked. She didn't think you'd actually leave. I stared at the words. Shocked. Not sorry. Not wrong. Just surprised that I'd followed through. I didn't reply. People rarely expect silence to be louder than words. By noon, I had already arranged the basics. A small bed, a desk, a shelf. I unpacked my tools, hung my jacket on a hook near the door, and told myself this was enough. The apartment smelled like dust and metal, but it was mine. No one would roll their eyes if I spoke. No one would wait for another voice to repeat me before listening. That night, I sat on the floor eating takeout, the hum of the fridge my only company. The loneliness felt honest, almost cleansing. I could hear my own thoughts again. Day 2 came, and with it, more messages. Melissa again. Can we talk? Harper's really upset. You can't just walk away like this. Please answer. I didn't. Words had become currency too easily spent in that house. I'd given enough of them away. By the 3rd day, she called from another number. I answered without thinking. The sound of her voice carried both anger and fear. Andrew, this isn't fair. You just vanished. She's a mess. You could at least talk to her. I did, I said quietly. For 2 years. You just never heard me. There was silence on the other end. A silence heavy enough to make me almost hang up. Then she whispered. She's sorry. She didn't mean it. She meant every word. I replied. You just didn't want to believe her. I ended the call. That night, I slept better than I had in months. 3 weeks passed. Bills I no longer paid began to find their way back to them. Utilities, car insurance, streaming services, all the invisible threads that had kept their lives smooth. Melissa texted again. The car's not insured anymore. I didn't know the payments came from your account. We're behind on the electric bill. I thought you set it up in my name. I read them in silence. It was all there in her tone. Not anger, not humility, just confusion. The realization that the life she and her daughter had taken for granted had always been built on someone else's quiet labor. A few days later, another message. Harper's different now. Quieter. Withdrawn. She keeps asking when you'll come back. I smiled, not out of cruelty, but out of recognition. People only change when comfort disappears. I didn't answer. Instead, I went back to my work. I threw myself into it, refinishing cabinets, welding frames, repairing old tools. My hands had something real to hold again. The rhythm of work steadied me. Each evening, I'd wash up, sit by the window, and watched the sunset burn across the horizon. I thought of them less and less, until the letter arrived. It came in a plain envelope, no return address, just my name written in careful handwriting. I knew it wasn't from Melissa. She typed everything. The letters were uneven, uncertain. Harper's. I sat at the table for a long time before opening it. Inside one page, lined paper, written in blue ink. The words small, shaky. I didn't realize how much you did until it was gone. I kept reading. Mom's been working extra hours. The car broke down. We don't have internet anymore. I thought you were just trying to control everything. But now I see you were holding everything together. You were the only adult who actually cared about us. I'm sorry for how I talked to you. I didn't mean it. I just wanted things my way. Please come back. The last line was smudged, like she'd pressed too hard with the pen or cried while writing. I folded the letter carefully and set it beside my coffee mug. My hands were steady. Regret is a strange currency it spends too late. I didn't write back. That night, I walked down to the workshop, turned on the light, and stared at the walls lined with tools. Everything in its place, everything silent, obedient. I realized how long I had lived surrounded by noise, how much of myself I had lost trying to be heard in a house that only echoed with other people's wants. Now there was peace. Not joy, not victory, just peace. The kind that feels almost foreign at first, like breathing clean air after years underground. Sometimes, I'd catch myself wondering what Melissa was telling people. Probably that I'd walked out, that I'd given up. Maybe she painted me as cold, unfeeling, selfish. People always need a villain to make sense of loss. I didn't mind. Let her rewrite the story. I knew the truth. I hadn't left to hurt them. I'd left to stop being hurt. One evening, near the end of summer, I drove past the old house. The yard was overgrown. The lavender I'd planted was brown and brittle. The porch light was off. Through the window, I saw two shadows, Melissa and Harper, eating dinner at the table. No laughter, no warmth, just motion, mechanical, necessary. I didn't stop. I didn't honk or wave. I just watched for a moment, then drove on. The road ahead was narrow and quiet, lined with fields that shimmered under the fading sun. In that moment, I realized something simple. Absence teaches louder than presence ever could. My silence had become their lesson. Later that night, back in my apartment, I reread Harper's letter once more. The handwriting looked younger than I remembered her being. I wondered if she had really changed or if she just missed convenience disguised as care. Maybe both. Maybe it didn't matter. I tucked the letter into a drawer, between invoices and old photos, and turned off the light. The next morning, I woke early again, the habit of years that no longer served anyone but me. I brewed coffee, stepped outside, and felt the air shift, cool, clean, untouched by voices that doubted or dismissed. Freedom, I learned, doesn't come with celebration. It comes quietly, like a man packing his tools after finishing a job that was never his to begin with. Melissa and Harper would survive. People always do when they have to. Maybe, one day, Harper would understand that responsibility isn't control. It's love expressed through labor. Maybe Melissa would finally see what silence costs. Or maybe not. Maybe they'd just move on, find another man to carry the load, another name to blame when things fell apart. That wasn't my concern anymore. Sometimes love means leaving. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is disappear and let people feel the weight of what they once dismissed. I didn't hate them. I didn't wish them harm. But I wasn't coming back. I had given them everything: time, patience, forgiveness, and in return they had taught me a lesson I would never forget. The loudest no you can give is silence. And so I kept it. A month passed before I saw Melissa's handwriting again. The envelope was thinner this time, pale blue, folded over twice as if she had hesitated before sending it. I found it waiting on my doorstep when I came back from work. No return address, no name on the back, just my own written carefully across the front. The loop's familiar enough to stop me in place. For a moment I considered throwing it out. Letters from the past are traps. They smell like guilt disguised as love. But curiosity is a slow poison. and I've never been immune to it. I carried it inside, sat at the table, and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Her words were neat, almost formal. "Andrew, I don't know how to start this. Things have been hard since you left. Harper's been quiet. She doesn't talk to me much anymore. She blames herself, though she'd never say it out loud. I think she's starting to understand what she lost. The bills are piling up. I've picked up extra shifts. I'm not asking you to come back, just to know that you mattered. You held this family together more than I ever admitted. I'm sorry for letting it all fall apart." At the bottom, in smaller handwriting, "She wrote you something too." There was another piece of paper folded behind it, lined notebook paper, the kind Harper used for school. The handwriting was messy, uneven, her sentences tripping over themselves. "I didn't realize how much you did until it was gone. I thought you just wanted to control everything. I see now you were taking care of us. I'm sorry for what I said that night. I was angry at Mom, not you. I know you won't answer, but I wanted to tell you anyway." That was all. No questions. No promises. Just a confession written in ink that bled through the page. I sat there for a long time, the letter trembling slightly in my hands. Not from emotion, from the weight of what it meant. Regret had finally found its way home, but too late to change anything. I placed both letters side by side on the table. For years I'd waited for acknowledgement, for someone to see me, to admit that my presence had been more than a paycheck. And now, when I'd finally stopped needing it, it arrived. Isn't that always the way? People recognize your worth only once it's gone. I folded the pages carefully and slid them into a drawer. I didn't plan to write back. Not out of spite, but because there was nothing left to say. Some bridges don't burn. They simply collapse under the weight of what was never balanced. The days moved quietly after that. Work filled the hours. The apartment began to feel like a place I lived in, not just slept in. I fixed small things no one else would ever notice. A loose hinge, a wobbly shelf, habits that had once belonged to a different life. Sometimes, when the evening light turned the walls amber, I'd think of Harper's face the day she told me she only listened to her mom. I'd wonder if she remembered it now, if she replayed it the way I once had. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. The truth is, some lessons don't bloom into guilt until long after the garden's dead. One weekend, I drove out of the city. No destination, just the open road stretching toward nothing. I passed old gas stations, empty lots, places where the air itself seemed tired. Somewhere along a back road, I stopped near a small diner, the kind that still smelled of coffee and fried eggs no matter what time it was. A young waitress brought my meal. She couldn't have been more than 19. When she called me sir, I felt the years in my bones. She smiled, polite, tired. There was something in her eyes that reminded me of Harper, that restless hunger to be seen, mixed with the certainty that she already knew everything. When I left, I tipped her too much. Not because she earned it, but because once, someone had believed generosity could fix what words couldn't. That night, driving back under a sky that looked bruised with rain, I thought about forgiveness. Not theirs, mine. I realized I'd been holding on to anger like it was proof that I still cared. But the truth is, anger fades too once it's done its job. It burns until there's nothing left to protect, then turns to ash. By the time I reached my apartment, I felt lighter. Not healed, not redeemed, just lighter. A few days later, another letter came. This one wasn't from Melissa or Harper. It was from the leasing office of the old house. The note was brief. Property available again next month. Previous tenants vacating. I stared at it for a long time. The image of that house returned. The creaking floors, the lavender gone to seed, the sound of laughter that had never included me. The idea of returning felt absurd. But some part of me wanted to see it one last time, to confirm that the past was as small as it now felt. So I drove there one Sunday afternoon. The driveway was cracked, weeds curling through the seams. The porch I'd repaired was peeling again. A for rent sign leaned crooked in the yard. The curtains were gone. The house looked hollow, a shell of something that had once pretended to be alive. I parked across the street and just watched. Felt strange, like standing over a grave you dug yourself. I remembered every argument, every swallowed word, every moment I'd convinced myself that silence was strength. A neighbor walked by, an older man with a dog. He nodded. "You moving in?" I shook my head. "Just passing through." He smiled. "Good. That house needs peace." I almost laughed. Driving away, I realized how far I'd come. Not in miles, but in distance from the man who once believed love meant endurance. I used to think walking away was failure. Now I know it's sometimes the only honest thing left to do. Back home, I took Harper's letter from the drawer again. The paper had creased where I'd folded it too tightly. I read it one last time and understood something I hadn't before. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was offering recognition, the first real one she'd ever given me. That mattered more than I expected. I didn't respond, but I didn't throw it away either. I slipped it between 2 pages of an old book, a quiet reminder that even the cruelest endings can leave something worth keeping. Weeks later, Melissa called once more. Her voice was soft, cautious. "We're moving," she said, "closer to her college. I thought you should know." I thanked her. She hesitated. "Harper wanted to say she hopes you're okay." "I am," I said. When we hung up, I stood by the window for a long time, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. Somewhere out there, they were starting over again. Maybe with new hope, maybe with new lies. Either way, it wasn't my concern anymore. I poured a drink, sat down, and thought about the years I'd given away so freely. I didn't regret them. Regret is for people who still wish they could go back. I didn't. I'd learned too much in leaving. I learned that love without respect is charity, and charity breeds contempt. I learned that silence, when chosen, can be power. And I learned that some homes are built not to last, but to teach. I raised my glass to the empty room and whispered, more to myself than to anyone else, "Here's to quiet." The walls didn't answer, but they didn't need to. And so it ended, not with shouting, not with apologies, but with understanding. I had done what love demanded, and when love was spent, I did what dignity required. Because sometimes the kindest thing a man can do is walk away before the world convinces him to hate the people he once tried to save. So tell me, was I wrong to leave them to the silence they created? Or was I finally right to let it teach them what my words never could?